Hi, Randy.
Hello, Melanie. How are you today?
Yes, I'm full of the joys of nearly autumn.
Excellent, excellent. So, are you preaching on Sunday?
No, I'm actually going out, but so it's been great to do the reading.
Righty ho. Okay.
Oh, we got it wrong. Sunday. See, you messed me up by asking that. I'm not preaching on Sunday, but I am preaching this passage.
Well done. I'm pleased to hear it. You're not been
I could start
totally
this
lazy.
again. We're going to start this again.
Okay.
Hi, Randy. How you doing?
I'm okay, thank you, Melanie. How are you?
Yes, I'm full of the joys of nearly autumn.
I'm pleased to hear it. I'm pleased to hear it. So, are you going to be preaching on Mark chapter 7?
I am, yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And what's your big idea going to be?
Well, it's an interesting passage, isn't it? And thankfully, it's not been carved up by the people who put the lectionary together, has it?
Do you not think so?
It's just a chunk of verses. At least they haven't missed bits out in the middle.
Yeah, but you see, one of my issues would be is the healing of the deaf mute really to go with the healing of the Syrophoenician woman, or should the deaf mute go with chapter 8 so that you get a block of teaching that's topped and tailed, first of all, by the deaf mute and then by the healing of the blind man? But the lectionary
Well,
writers know better than we know.
well, it depends because actually there is something structural going on here, and that may well be in it as well. But don't you think there's something to do with being satisfied? Um, and something to do with Jesus's mission to the Gentiles. In
Mhm.
which case, actually, it would be better to have the Syrophoenician woman, the healing of the deaf man, and the feeding of the 4,000 all as a chunk. But that would make it quite a long passage.
But if you put the healing of the deaf mute with the healing of the blind man together, you get quite a interesting structure with the revelation coming just right at the very end. And so you get the point of, I mean, this will be more, well, actually, the lectionary misses it out this year, doesn't it? Um, Misses chapter 8 out in next week's time. But they just go together, the healing of the deaf, the healing of the blind. How are you going to come to know the Lord Jesus? Well, Jesus needs to bring your healing so that you hear and so that you can see. And it's Jesus who has to bring it. But hey ho, the lectionary writers know better than we know. So
Um,
we work with what the lectionary writers have given us.
Well, we do, but we need to take those other factors in mind, don't we? So that's one of the key points going on here. But you've also got who is Jesus come for?
Yeah.
So you've got that
And
we need Jesus to open the eyes and open the ears.
mhm.
Um, and you get that twofold thing, don't you, with the two-step thing with the blind man and with the Peter's declaration.
Hmm.
But the context of this passage, it's just come straight after all of the teaching or this chunk of teaching about clean and unclean and
Hmm.
about it's not what goes into the body, but what comes out that makes you unclean. And then
Hmm.
straight away, Jesus is off to Gentile territory, isn't he?
Hmm.
And our next three things all happen in Gentile territory.
And you just mentioned a really interesting structural point. If you notice, he challenges the Jews over unclean and clean three times. Then he goes into the Gentile territory, and three times again, you get the challenge or the issue of clean versus unclean. So Mark puts two lots of three together. So he does three with the Jewish audience, then three with the Gentile audience.
Great, isn't it? Don't you just love the Bible? It's just wonderful.
And the number three occurs all the way through Mark. So previous discussions, it's always been three things. So you see, Mark was really a good evangelical preacher. 3 points.
But I think going back to the whole unclean thing, I think we've got to grasp that context to really understand what's going on with the Syrophoenician woman because
Mhm.
people get jolly upset about it, don't they?
Do they?
Well, would Jesus calling her a dog?
Right, okay. Why would they get upset about that?
Well, it's a bit insulting, isn't it, to call somebody a dog? Would you
Right?
not say? If I called you a
But
dog, would you like it?
but wasn't that common at the time?
It might be common, but it's still insulting, isn't it?
But the
And it was
woman
meant
isn't.
to be, wasn't it?
But the woman doesn't seem to be insulted by it. She perfectly accepts it.
I know, and that's really interesting, isn't it? Because that is the heart of what's going on here.
Hmm.
Is that actually Jesus is saying, no, you know, you're a Gentile, you're not in the promise here. I've got
Hmm.
no obligation to heal your daughter, I've no obligation to share my grace with you. And then she realizes, well, actually, you might have no obligation, but you've got so much grace that it can overflow into somebody like me.
Is that what Jesus is saying?
Do you not think so? What do you think Jesus is saying then?
I think you're right that the woman acknowledges that the gospel message goes first to the people of Israel, and then from the people of Israel it goes out to the whole world. But Jesus isn't precluding that. He's saying almost, yeah, you are included, but first it goes to the Israelites, the people of Israel.
But
That
I
was the
think
great
that's not the
promise to
shock.
Abraham.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the shock here. I think the shock factor is that the dogs get the food as well. You know, that she as a Gentile gets it, and that she's realised that it's for her as well. Because as we read the passage, I I think that as we hear Jesus's strong language, we've got to think, actually, most of us are the Gentiles.
Hmm.
We're the dogs. God is not obligated to give us anything. Yet by his grace, he's included us and he's drawn us in. And I think that's a huge message and it's a wonderful truth. And I think it's vital that we grasp that without
Hmm.
Jesus, we are unclean, we are excluded, we are the dogs.
Yeah.
But with him, we're, you know, we get, we get that wonderful grace and the acclamation of Jesus.
Hmm. Another one I found interesting was back in verse 26, before verse 27. Um, we get the
That's
woman was,
usually where verse 26 comes.
sorry.
That's usually where verse 26 comes.
Well, you've gone straight into verse 27. I'm just saying verse 26 is kind of an important point as well, um, amongst others. But 26, the woman was Greek. She was born in Syrian Phoenicia. So, first of all, she's a woman. Then she's Greek, so she's Gentile. She was born in Syrian Phoenicia, which was a hotbed of paganism. So, woman, Gentile, pagan. She has three things against her. And what does she do? And this is really interesting. Well, I thought it was really interesting. Um, she begs Jesus. Now, where else in Mark's gospel does someone beg Jesus? Well, 523, it's Jairus is the other person who begs Jesus. And what's he? President of the synagogue. And so it doesn't matter what your gender is, it doesn't matter what
Mm.
your race is, it doesn't matter whether you've got some sort of predisposition towards the law or Judaism, or whether you're a pagan, there is no advantage with Jesus. We all need to come to Jesus begging for his grace on our knees. So you get that contrast between Jairus in 523 and then this woman in 726, which is kind of an interesting contrast. So it's about need, not status, that Jesus responds to.
Yeah, and it's about grace though as well, isn't it? You
Well,
know,
yes,
Jesus doesn't have to do it, but he does anyway. Because what I found is to go back to that dogs question, right? As
you
I
like
said that
dogs.
sometimes no, I don't actually. But I think people are uncomfortable with it. So either they skip over that bit or they try and explain it away. And I was really intrigued because one of my commentaries, this one,
Uh-huh.
he takes a different viewpoint on that whole dog thing. Because he says he sort of hones in on the word that Jesus uses for dogs as being little dogs.
Hmm.
And he takes it as being nothing about her being Gentile or it being insulting. He takes it as being like Jesus using the scenario in front of him, so that there was a table with little dogs under it, and
Yeah.
he was using that just a description from the environment, and it's not meant to have that shock factor as well. What do you think of that?
About the dogs and being pet dogs sitting under the table as opposed to the stray dogs that are wandering the streets. So, in a sense, it's been part of the family, but not the same status as the children, but you're still part of the
But
family,
don't you think that
a
misses the
family
point?
pet.
Don't you think that kind of dilutes the point? Because the fact that you highlighted the fact that Mark mentions 3 times this woman's status, and that it comes after we've had all this business about clean and unclean. And it strikes me that it mirrors Acts 10 as well,
Mm,
where you've got Peter with the sheet and
hmm,
the unclean, and then the next thing you've got the door knocking and him being called to go and see Cornelius.
hmm.
So you've got the same pattern. So I think if you're majoring on these being little dogs and watering it down, you're actually missing the shock factor and the big point that's being made here.
But the translation of the word dogs there is not the dogs used as the wild dogs that roam the street. It is family
Think,
dogs.
think, Bully dogs, wild dogs, King Charles Spaniels, Great Danes. I, I think that that's a bit of a blind alley. The fact is, if
No, I
somebody
don't
calls
think
you a dog, if I was to call you a dog, right, does it matter if I had in my mind a Great Dane or an XL bully? Would it matter? You'd think that's jolly insulting anyway.
they're very different things how you treat them.
I think like missing the point. He's like, wish the point has gone.
No, no, I think you're not being careful with the actual translation and the context.
Yeah, I'm being very careful with the context.
No,
And
you're
it's the
not.
context, it is the context that leads to that interpretation as
Right.
it being
But the
this
word
woman
that's
is unclean. The woman is unclean, and Jesus is saying, "No, you're unclean. You're not having any of this. You're not entitled." And she's saying, "Actually, I know that you've got enough grace for me too."
what I think we're both missing the key point. Because I think the key point is that the woman recognizes she is unclean, but that
Just say
makes
that.
but that makes no. Well, what do you think she's saying in 27 and 28 then?
What? I said she's
She's
recognizing her
saying
status.
yeah, I'm a dog. I'm unclean because being called a dog, as you've just said, was a symbol of being unclean. And so I can go to Jesus. And it's about recognizing I am unclean and going to Jesus.
Yeah, but the focus is not on her, but on Jesus. And the focus should always be on Jesus, recognizing who we are, but the focus on Jesus and his grace. It's his grace that's enough and is overflowing.
So what's the big difference then between Jairus or between one of the Jewish Pharisees and this woman?
Oh,
She rec she
yeah,
recognizes,
it's beauty. She recognizes it.
yeah. And so she recognizes she's unclean and she goes and begs Jesus for his grace
And why does she go and beg Jesus for his grace?
because there's nowhere else to go.
Quickly,
But
because
she
she
doesn't
knows that
but,
he's got enough grace for her.
but she
Because
doesn't go there saying, I'm not a dog, I'm not unclean. She goes saying, yes, I am unclean, I am a dog. So give me the crumbs.
yeah, but she wouldn't. go if she didn't think Jesus had enough grace for her. Because, we can say that, oh, I'm unclean, I'm unworthy and stuff. And you can get down into a big pit of depression, and people do, and it's very serious if that's where your focus is. But the focus is, yes, that's who I am, that's my status, and
Yeah,
that's all of our status. But Jesus has got grace for me.
yes, but she recognizes
She
that
does
she has
recognize
need
it.
of Jesus.
Oh, this Yes. Should we move on to the other bit? But actually, no. Before we move on to the other bit, one
Are
of
you
the
sure?
writers made a really interesting point, right, about the crumbs and sort of what Jesus offers the Gentiles. It's because they made the point. I think it was in the Dig Deeper book, but you start with the crumbs from under the master's table, and then the next feeding is the feeding of the 4,000. So you've got this multitude of feeding. And then eventually there'll be the feeding at the marriage feast of the Lamb
Hmm.
for the Gentiles. Isn't that lovely? Because we're the Gentiles. And isn't
Yeah,
that lovely? You go from crumbs to the feeding of the 4,000 to all the splendor of the table of God. So I think that's wonderful.
please. Have you got a quote from J C Ryle for us on it? Because he'll sort out our disagreements.
Well, actually, J C Ryle is very quiet on the matter, and
Oh,
he
right,
focuses in on the woman's prayer.
right, right.
Um, which is a point, but I think it's a subsidiary point to the point that's actually being made. But he does say, I've just wrote this little quote down: where there is a praying mother, there is always hope. I think
Right.
that's a nice quote. Where there's a
It
praying
is.
mother, there's always hope. And she begs for her daughter, doesn't she? And I expect all of us who are parents at some point or another have knelt down before God weeping,
Yeah.
begging for our children for for whatever thing it might be that's the trouble at the time. I certainly know I have. But I don't think that's the main point of this text, actually. So in a way, I disagree with JC around there. But
Never.
the other fella, just to move us on a little bit. So we're still in a sort of Gentile area, aren't we?
Which other
With
fella?
the fella here now who's deaf and can't speak.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant your other commentary book.
Oh, sorry, unclear. This deaf fella.
Righto.
Because interestingly, he doesn't get a name either, does he?
He doesn't know. And just another thing that's missing, just as an aside, Jesus doesn't do any teaching, does he? It's almost they're all enacted parables, but he doesn't actually do any teaching as recorded here. I mean, whether he did or he didn't.
No. And actually, with the Syrophoenician woman, he's got into her house and he's trying to escape for a bit.
Yeah, want some
So
peace and
not only is he
quiet.
not teaching, he's trying to get a bit of R&R.
Yeah. Anyway, you were going to tell us about the deaf man.
Oh no, I was, you made the point at the beginning that here we've got a miracle. Jesus opens the ears
Hmm.
and enables the speech
Yeah.
to happen. You've got a miracle. Jesus can do the impossible, and we need Jesus to open our ears and
Hmm.
open our mouths to speak his praises.
Yeah. The other one thing I did find really interesting was in verse 32, there were some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk. That phrase could hardly talk. The other place that's used in the Bible, that in the Greek, is back in Isaiah 35, which of course is the quotation at the end. So the whole incident is sandwiched by Isaiah 35. And of course, Isaiah 35 is about a season of joy. So Mark doesn't actually quote from the Old Testament very often because he's writing to a Roman Gentile audience. But that little phrase there is Isaiah 35, a season of joy. So if you were a Jewish reader reading this, you would pick up that we're going to have something that's going to bring joy um, about to unfold.
It's a really cool point. I actually hadn't spotted that, so that's a really cool point. I love that.
Thank you.
But what I have also just spotted is at the end of verse 32, they begged him to lay his
Yeah,
hands on him.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
hadn't spotted that until just
yeah.
now. So your
And
Syrophoenician woman was begging Jesus, and here they're begging Jesus for help.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And do you also notice what I just want to go back and double check um that it's other people. So with the Syrophoenician woman, it's actually her daughter who's possessed by an impure spirit. Here, it's some people who are bringing to Jesus and then recognizing our status before Jesus and begging Jesus to graciously act.
Yeah, I suppose it's back to Ryle's point about intercessory prayer, really, praying for
Yeah,
others.
yeah,
It's really important, whether
yeah.
they're your daughter or whether they're a friend or whether they're somebody you don't know, actually. If they need God's help, we can pray
Yeah.
and God hears those prayers and honors them, which is an encouragement.
Can I ask you a
Uh,
question?
you can ask me a question.
And you'll explain it for me.
Depends what the question is.
I find is there irony that Jesus heals a deaf man and so that he could talk and then commands him not to speak? You know, you've just healed someone so they can talk and then say don't speak.
It's
So
true, isn't
what's
it?
that about?
That is true. Well, it's this messianic secret business, isn't it? You get it all the way through, Mark, don't you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's not the time yet to speak.
Yeah. And that the sign actually is inadequate, that it's going to be the cross and the suffering that is going
Yeah.
to truly bring people to the Lord Jesus. The other interesting thing I found kind of interesting is 37. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, which is creation, Genesis, and again, sort of Jesus taking on the role of God and recognizing who Jesus is.
Got a great quote from J C Ryle on that.
Oh, I thought you might. Go on then.
Do you
Get
want to
to
hear
this.
it? Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, go on.
Right. Let us remember it as we look back over the days past of our lives from the hour of our conversion. Our Lord hath done all things well, in first bringing us out of darkness into marvellous light, in humbling us and teaching us our weakness, guilt, and folly, in stripping us of our idols and choosing all our portions, in placing us where we are and giving us what we have. How well everything has been done. How great the mercy that we have not had our own way. Let us remember it as we look forward to the days yet to come. We do not know what they may be, bright or dark, many or few, but we know that we are in the hands of him who doeth all things well. He will not err in any of his dealings with us. He will take away and give. He will afflict and bereave. He will move and he will settle with perfect wisdom at the right time in the right way. The great shepherd of the sheep makes no mistake. He leads every lamb of his flock by the right way to the city of habitation. I love that. Don't you love that?
It's grand.
He does all things well.
Yeah. That's a
Oh,
good
well.
note to leave it.
Yeah, it is. Well, are you preaching it?
I am. Yes, I will be.
Oh, there we
Yes,
are. Well, we'll have to compare notes after the fact then.
we will. We will. Good luck.
Thank you.
Ta-ra.
Bye.